What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the heaviest show in the universe. Today, we are not only talking about all things heavy and all things absolutely friggin' brutal, we are going over the 5 best, most undeniably fantastic albums of the year 1992. One year before I was even born. Let's see what this year has to offer us. Let's get into it. Okay, so what was going on in the year 1992? This was kind of an odd year for metal. Metal was coming out of its golden age in the 1980s, where some of the best, most extreme genres of metal were born, and where some of the biggest bands of all time were coming out and releasing music, and some of the most incredible albums of all time, not just within metal, but within music, were released. And as everyone's coming down off this incredible high of the 1980s, a new form of music is starting to take hold in grunge. And grunge killed glam metal completely, thank freaking God, because no one likes that crap, really. Like, there's a couple bangers, but it's not that great. But also, it started to chip away at thrash's popularity. But 1992 was a year that still had a remarkable amount of fantastic albums released for metal. And so let's kick things off with the 5th best record of 1992. A Blaze in the Northern Sky by Dark Throne. Dude, okay. I never really listened to black metal. I've always struggled to get into it and to see the pull of it. I have one buddy who absolutely freaking loves black metal, and he always tries to get me to listen to this album and a couple others by Dark Throne, and now I see why after listening to this. Now, Fenriz himself says, like, look, this album is kind of death metal. It's like half death metal. I have no clue what he's talking about. While there are one or two riffs that could be considered death metal, most notably at around the 1 minute mark of PARAGON BELIAL, and the 1 minute mark of Where Cold Wind Blows, as well as a couple guitar solos here and there, this is what I know to be black metal. The production quality is very black metal. The vocals are very black metal. The tremolo picked riffs are very black metal. And of course, those banging rock and roll drum beats are signature black metal. Come on. So I think Fenriz is kind of sniffing his own asshole on this when he says, like, oh, this is actually a death metal album and it's not true black metal just yet. And this album would actually be one of the birthing albums of the true Norwegian black metal genre of music. This is considered a classic within the genre, and I can see why. This is a good album. If you can get over the shrieked vocals and the poor production quality, which is, it's hard to crap on it because it's a part of what makes black metal what it is, then you can actually really enjoy this album. I think it's great, and I think all metalheads should give this a shot. For me, the notable tracks on here were Catharian Life Code, the title track, and Pagan Winter. Absolute bangers. And honestly, the whole album is really good, but those are the 3 tracks out of the 6 that stood out to me. There were no skippables. The drumming is fantastic, and the rawness and the brutality of the whole thing just make you bob your head a lot. I found myself going like a lot to this whole album. So praise where it's due. A Blaze in the Northern Sky, fantastic album. Coming in at number 4, Somewhere Far Beyond by Blind Freaking Gaurdian. I've never been much of a power metal guy. When someone says power metal to me, Balm, I think of Dragon Force. And of course, I'll think of bands like Iced Earth, Savatage, Sabaton, stuff like that. But I never really listened to it. And I've always kind of wanted to get into power metal, bands like Blind Guardian and Halloween, but I never really have. Up until now, this is the epitome of power metal, like through and through. They're talking about dragons and ogres and bards. Dude, this is really cool and it's super interesting. The vocals ride high through the whole production and they're fantastic. They're fantastical. They really get you in the vibe of this album and what Blind Guardian are trying to portray when it comes to power metal. The vocals fit in perfectly. The orchestral incorporation throughout the whole album is fantastic. It feels perfectly in place, not out of place or forced at all. And it gives the album a neoclassical vibe and not just a pure power or thrash metal vibe. The guitar work is epic and fantastic, and it really carries this whole album. The drumming wasn't very present, and the bass wasn't very present, but the vocals and the guitar work carry this album through, and it is absolutely on point. When I listened to this, I was like, damn, if Queen played metal, they would likely play something like this. Like, look at a song like Black Chamber. It really reminds me of Freddie Mercury. Great shot! If Dragon Force didn't rely on the same techniques over and over and over and over again ad nauseum, they would probably end up sounding a lot like Blind Guardian because the talent is there, but Blind Guardian is a much better songwriting band than Dragon Force ever has been or ever likely will be. Every song on this album was so cool and really got me into the vibe of what they were trying to portray. But if I could name 3 songs for you guys to really go and check out, it'd be the first track, Time What Is Time, Theater of Pain, and Ashes to Ashes, and I guess both of the Bard songs. Those are really cool pieces, and this album was so much fun to listen to. Definitely go and try it out. Now at number 3 is probably, when it comes to just pure music, the ability to write music, knowledge of music, and just the incorporation of different genres of music, the diversity of the music, this album would be number 1. But unfortunately, when it comes to music and when it comes to how I want to rank these, more than that needs to be taken into play. And that's why Images and Words by Dream Theater is only at number 3. No, the reason why it sounds like it's a bad thing that's at number 3 is because this album is fantastic. The writing is incredible. The different genres of music that they're able to put in this, like some pop and synth. It sounds like I'm listening to Michael Jackson at times.
Hold it now. Wait a minute. Come on. Just let me catch my breath.
It's so cool. I had a lot of fun listening to this album, and I loved listening to John Petrucci's work on the guitar. Like, he's an absolute shred master. It was amazing. And songs like Another Day even had a power metal vibe on it with its fantastic vocal performance. Metropolis Part 1 is an absolute masterpiece in musical work and storytelling, and it really showcases the way that this band can use each instrument to play off each other, and that is very prominent for the bass interlude at around 5 minutes and 40 seconds. The Under a Glass Moon intro riff is amazing as well, and the guitar solo at 4 minutes and 30 seconds really shows how John Petrucci can go from absolute metal shred master to jazz influenced fantastic groovy parts as well within one solo, within one song, and it's an absolute sight to behold for your ears. And Learning to Live is a fantastic way to end off this album. And like I said before, when it comes to pure music knowledge, the ability to write music, the way to put songs together and have a progressive vibe about it, and really just sit down, have a beer or a glass of wine and appreciate what the music is, if that was all it was, then this album would be number 1. But there's more to music, at least for me. There's more to music than just how well you can incorporate music theory, how well you can incorporate your knowledge of music, how well you can shred and switch genres within certain songs and within certain albums. So that's why it only places at number 3, and that's why the next 2 are higher than it. And now for these top two albums, man, I battled back and forth of which one I was going to put number one. I had to think about what was more influential, and I had to think about other things that I mentioned before, like the music writing ability, the way the songs are structured, and the way that the musicians can incorporate different types of music, as well as just pure enjoyment of listening to it. I thought about if I had to sit down and listen to either of these albums for the rest of my life, which one would I choose? Which one had a bit more diversity in it? Which one had a bit more song structure in it? Which one had a vibe in it that I liked a bit more, that was more pleasing to my ears, but also I could throw on in the gym and work out to? It was so tough to place one of these albums on top of the other because they're both epics. They're both two of the greatest metal albums, frankly, ever written. But when all was said and done, number two was Vulgar Display of Power by Pantera. Likely the most influential metal album of the 90s, and one of the albums that saved metal from obscurity in the 90s with the rise of grunge. This album was needed at the time it came out. This is one of the heaviest metal albums, if not the heaviest metal album ever made. And don't tell me like, yo bro, what about all the slam metal, slam death metal bands, man? They're so fucking heavy, they down tuned to like C sharp and they just play fucking power chords, bro. I keep telling people there's more to being heavy than just playing heavy, because it's easy, like these slam metal bands, to just have the most guttural vocals possible and to play chugga riffs and say, oh, this is the heaviest shit I've ever heard in my life. If you look actually at the music, there's so much more to being heavy than just playing chuggas with guttural vocals. And that's why Vulgar Display of Power is so special. That's why Vulgar Display of Power is likely the heaviest metal album ever made. The heaviest album of all time. The production quality is fantastic and adds to the music. Vinny's drum playing is a grounding anchor that allows Dime to go about what he wants to do and allows Phil Anselmo to sing to his heart's content, while he just sits back and plays this very smooth, very heavy, very pounding, and very pattern-driven drum playing that influenced bands for years to come. The ability to switch tempos from fast to medium to slow and then boom, right back to fast as quick as possible on a dime change is what makes this album heavy. If you look at a song like This Love, Dime is completely going off the entire song. And the reason he's able to do that is because you have Vinny in the background going to he can play those heavy riffs into the guitar fills, into the solo, into even more heavy riffs. Like when they come out of the second chorus of This Love, and Dime is able to go into that bouncy, heavy, thrashy, groovy riff, that is what makes heaviness. The definition of heaviness and groove metal is the song Mouth for War. It's balls to the wall, power and piss and vinegar and energy. It's so cool. And of course you have Walk, the most badass song of all time with one of the most unique guitar solos of all time as well. Simplicity and genius of the main riff is, it's taken for granted in this day and age, I feel like, because so many bands, they try to make simple, cool riffs like Walk, but nah, you can't do it, bro. You can't do it. You just turn out to be lame. And then you have the forgotten songs like No Good, Attack the Radical, which has a fantastic groove and tempo throughout the entire song, and something like Regular People is a showcase of the uniqueness of Dime and how he and Rex Brown really play off each other to create the heavy vibe of this whole album. And the heaviest riff on the album is probably that open pentatonic riff on A New Level. Really hard to not put this album at number one, but that's less of a knock on this album and more of praise of the next album coming up. Vulgar Display of Power is one of the most important and fantastic metal albums ever written. And again, it was hard to put it at number two because it's one of my personal favorites of all time. But at number one, we have another masterpiece of metal that's often forgotten in this band's catalog because it's surrounded by a couple of other masterpieces as well. At number 1, we have Megadeth, Countdown to Extinction. This album is often considered Megadeth's Black Album by me personally and by a lot of others because while there is some really good thrash licks on here, it was definitely a transition from the epicness of Rust in Peace into a more stadium-oriented type of thrash metal or metal. There's so many awesome hooks throughout this whole album and licky guitar solos that it was definitely moving in that direction. The whole album front to back is just full of catchy chorus riffs, and it's not as heavy as Vulgar Display. It's not as heavy as A Blaze in the Northern Sky, but it combines everything that I talked about from every single one of these albums before and creates a metal masterpiece that, like I said earlier, is often forgotten in this band's catalog. This was Megadeth's first double platinum album. It came in at number 2 on the billboards, only under that guy Billy Ray Cyrus.
All gave some gave all.
Damn, the production of this album is on point from A to Z. It's A1. It is awesome. Everything in the mix is perfectly in balance, from the drums and the bass and the guitars and the vocals. And speaking of the vocals, this is Dave Mustaine's first great vocal production. Everyone's knock against Megadeth is Dave Mustaine's vocals. Like, oh, I'd listen to Megadeth, but the Dave Mustaine vocals are so bad. Well, guess what? You can't say that anymore. This album is truly a great vocal performance. He's so confident and he's able to attack the mic in a way that he wasn't before. And I think a lot of that has to do with the more rock or metal-oriented song structures that they tried to achieve on this, going for a more of a stadium sound, kind of like the Black Album. This album is a more melodic and compact version of thrash versus the epicness of Rust in Peace and Peace Sells before. For the real thrashy songs on this album, you have Architecture of Aggression, and Captive Honor, as well as Ashes in Your Mouth. And what is likely the best song on this album is often forgotten in Foreclosure of a Dream, which is a beautiful masterpiece that no one ever seems to really bring up when they talk about the masterpieces of Megadeth, but I can assure you that this song is amazing in its own right. Some of Dave and Marty's best solo work is on this album, and David Ellefson keeps a grounded fretwork in the back on his bass that keeps everyone in line. And this is arguably Nick Menza's best performance, even better than on Rust in Peace. If you've never really given this album a chance because everyone looks at it as the album that came after the greatest friggin' GOAT metal album of all time, that's understandable. But I'm telling you right now to go and give this album a chance because it is almost every bit as good as Rust in Peace or Peace Sells, and it belongs in the upper echelon of not only Megadeth albums, but in the upper echelon of metal albums of all time. I didn't even know how much I loved this album until I went back and listened to it for this video. When I sat down for this video, I was like, Vulgar Display is going to be number 1, 100%. But before I made a decision, I went back and I re-listened to both of those albums, as well as the other 3, and I decided that, man, Countdown is a true masterpiece of metal. All right, what did you think? What are your top 5 albums of 1992? I want to hear what you had to say down below. I feel like I'm going to get a lot of flack for putting Countdown to Extinction above Vulgar Display, and I feel like all the prog nerds are going to come in here and be like, how could you put those 2 above Dream Theater? Well, guess what? I was pretty close to putting A Blaze in the Northern Sky above Dream Theater for a couple of reasons. I'm joking. Prog nerds, back off. Come on, man. Whoa. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode of the heaviest show in the universe. I hope you enjoyed it. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about my opinions down below, and I can't wait to hear your opinions as well down below. Go check out the Spotify playlist for this week's episode. Smash that subscribe button. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode, and I will see you next week on the heaviest show in the entire universe. Long live metal.